Okay, people are still coming, but we have audience also online, so we will get started. Welcome to this side meeting that is really going to be an interesting and fascinating discussion about this topic. This idea came from looking at the agenda of PMAC that is looking at AI and how we navigate future into this area, and especially what it means for health and health equity and health systems. And we've focused here on diplomacy and health diplomacy and aspects of that. So session is instigated by a group of people who are in a network of global health diplomacy training institutions, as well as with colleagues in Thailand through an institute here, and also the Enhancing Leadership in Global Health Diplomacy program here in Thailand. So it's organized with the efforts, and I think at this time, I want to make sure you know that the session is being recorded. We will be sharing that with our colleagues who were not able to join us today. We have two guests online, speakers online that will come later on. But before that, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of Dr. Varisa Paninkinarai and her team for helping put all of this together. So even between the time we had this idea and today, this whole world of AI has changed. Even in the last 2 days, this whole world of AI has changed. So we were really humble when we put this together. We said, we're not going to pretend that everybody knows the answers, but we want to talk about it. So that was the idea, and it proved to be the right thing to do. And of course, we have this as a step in the right direction of discussing. So several angles to that in terms of what AI means for governance of AI, diplomacy means for governance of AI, in terms of what are the ways the governance, global governance of AI is going, and diplomacy and negotiations and global frameworks and approaches. And we have guests who really know this area. They will help us to go a little bit deeper where things are. And then there's another angle to it, which is what is the role of AI to play in actual diplomacy and negotiation in making sure that the coherence of global kind of efforts and treaties and approaches and processes are enhanced by AI, in which way, and what are some of the early uses of it, and what are the challenges, ethical challenges, equity challenges, et cetera, et cetera. So these are few of the angles we're going to unpack. You may have, the audience as well, some other ideas, which we welcome. Please, we'll have that time at the end of the first round of comments from the panelists on the topic. And then please put your thinking hats on, those online as well. So if there are any questions, ideas, suggestions, we'd like to keep this as interactive as possible. We'll try to summarize at the end some of the key salient points and key sort of topics that are going to come out of it. And we also hope to continue this discussion in other fora, and I'll come to that later. In terms of our panelists today, we're covering with them all the different aspects of this. So I'll quickly introduce everyone here. From that side is Dr. Anders Nordström. He's currently working with Karolinska Institute, and also they have a global health diplomacy program, but he was formerly the global health ambassador for Sweden. A bit of a rare position, because not all countries have such a position, but some countries do. Then next to him is Jamila, Dr. Jamila Mahmood. And Jamila is with Sunway Center for Planetary Health in Malaysia. She's also a member of Higher Education Council in Malaysia and the Climate Action Council of Malaysia, as well as she's co-chair of the Climate and Health of the World Economic Forum. Next to Jamila, Dr. Jamila, is Ricardo Batista Leite. And Ricardo is currently the CEO of Health AI, a global agency that you will learn more about, based in Switzerland. Ricardo also a former member of parliament in Portugal, and he actually is the founder of a network of parliamentarians in global health called UNITE. Last is our host, and from the Ministry of Health, Dr. Nichanan Tantisirit, and she is the Deputy Director for the Bureau of Digital Health in the Ministry of Health. And on the screen, we have Dr. Tim Armstrong, currently the representative of WHO in the People's Republic, Democratic Republic of Laos. And Dr. Armstrong is formerly the Director of Governance at WHO, overseeing a lot of the negotiations that take place at WHO in his tenure when he was at HQ. So I think we'll start by asking Anders to set a stage a little bit about the global health diplomacy, where we are, how things evolved in the next 5 minutes, bring our audience up to speed, what actually global health diplomacy means and your experience, and also where we are going generally. And that will really set us for next comments. Please go ahead, Anders.
No, thank you. I think you said where we are evolving now in the next 5 minutes, because things will change, I think, in the next 5 minutes. Diplomacy in some way is a very old science and art. If we look back, AI is something very new. And that's why I'm very excited about this discussion today, because we're going to speak about both things here today. But just a little bit of a background, health diplomacy or global health diplomacy, I rather say health diplomacy today, is about the art and the tricks and the nature of how do you navigate in political processes, full stop. How do you navigate in political processes, either at global or at regional level, to be successful on a specific health agenda? Or it can also be how you use health as a means, as a vehicle to achieve something in international relations. So there are two ways of thinking around health diplomacy. Health diplomats are not only people trained diplomats in foreign ministry. For me, health diplomats are people that are basically using and are working in this space to achieve something in political settings. They could be coming from civil society, they could be researcher, it could be the private sector, international organizations, but of course, people working for the government. I was working for the Swedish government for 13 years as a Swedish ambassador, but I'm not a trained diplomat. I'm a medical doctor by background, but I was definitely a health diplomat. So that's a little bit of background. What I've experienced now since I left the foreign ministry now a little bit more than a year ago is basically an explosion in interest for this interface in between politics and health. Understanding how can we navigate in the political landscape. And of course, if we add AI to this, it becomes even more interesting. In the program that we run in Sweden, and also part of what is happening now across the world in other programs, in other institutions, and also part of a piece of research we're doing now together with the Lancet, we're going to do 4 papers on this theme, are some specific competencies. And I'd just like to say one word about 3 of those competencies, and with a question mark, whether AI will influence this or not. The first competence, if you're going to be successful as a health diplomat, is to understand powers. How do you read the power landscape? Where are decisions taken? Is it the minister who takes the decision, or is it someone else? Who's got influence over the decisions? And I suppose AI will be able to possibly help us to make that analysis, but can AI really help us with the judgment, making that assessment, really knowing, understanding the psychology? Because diplomacy is a lot about psychology, human relationships. And that's the second aspect of competences that we have in our programs. That's about trust. How do we create trust? We can call each other. We have got our WhatsApp number. We trust each other. How do you create those relationships? We say trust, but how do you create trust? Can AI help us with that? I'm not sure about that. Possibly. Or it might actually help go in the different direction, that this will actually destroy or interfere with our trust. And the last one, which is important also for a health diplomat, is to recognize leaders. Leaders that are not just leading, but leaders that are transformative leaders that are prepared to take a window of opportunity and to really to make a difference and to take risks. And can AI help us with that? To be able to support these kind of leaders? Can AI help us to identify those? Can AI help us then managing risk? They can calculate the risk. Yes, possibly. But personally, just to end my sort of inputs here is that AI will be both a challenge, I think, in terms of possibly interacting with some of this work. I will see what Tim says here, but can we have AI basically to come up with the best agreed language when we do international negotiations? I know they're already trying that, but again, if we get the perfect text, will people accept it? Possibly not, because they don't want to accept. They don't like it. They want to have the ownership, and AI might not give you that. But I think AI will help us a lot, but I don't think it will replace the psychology what also health diplomacy is about. Thank you.
Okay. But if I was to come back to the 5-minute thing, and if you had a crystal ball, what do you see in this year emerging on the global health diplomacy scene?
Generally or relating to also?
Generally, I think to set us in that.
Generally, I hope there was an article published just a couple of days ago by somebody from this region, the Dean of the School of Public Health in Singapore, YY,
right,
talking about that we are in a very challenging time, but this might be an opportunity now to rethink the way that we collaborate, that we work, and also to rethink the way that we do health diplomacy. I really like that article, so read that. So what I hope this year is not just going to focus on some of the big challenges now, focusing on the US. We were chatting about this, that possibly just let's forget about the US and let's move ahead. And I think that is what might happen. And I'm very excited about that.
Okay. So thanks for those reflections. And hopefully that brings us to a bit of a common ground in terms of what we mean by this terminology. And next, I'm going to ask actually Ricardo to tell us more about governance of AI for health and what's happening in that area, and also what are your thoughts of how diplomacy is helping in that process?
Oh, thanks, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here among friends and to discuss such a hot topic, especially on the first day of the Chinese New Year. Happy New Year to everyone. I even got my red tie out for the occasion. To say that you see, that's a diplomatic move here.
Right. Mine has red dots.
So, yeah, my perspective, as you said, will be based on mainly my two hats, right? As CEO of Health AI, where working with governments as an implementing partner, as a nonprofit, working to build the governance in countries to support countries in that movement, so they are capable of assessing and validating AI technologies to accelerate and scale to health systems these technologies that can lead to better health outcomes. But on the other hand, my political experience, I served 4 terms in Parliament in Portugal. Don't hold that against me. But I was also in local government as a deputy mayor, and I founded Unite. So it's been a fantastic opportunity because Unite, as a network of current and former legislators, it's a unique platform to really tap in to the mindset of how the thinking is going in a peer-to-peer network in now 116 countries where Unite is present. And looking at AI, one thing is absolutely clear. Whoever has the leadership in AI will have full leadership in every spectrum of our society, be it health, be it environment, be it climate, be it defense, be it the economy, be it manufacturing, be it logistics. And right now, there are only two countries that are positioned to lead, which is China and the United States, because they have the power and the investment to build the foundational models. This may change. This is where we are today. And so while we were moving up towards 2019, pre-COVID, in this idea of a multipolar world, I think we are moving very quickly towards, again, a Cold War with two actors, where the two actors are not US and Russia, but the US and China. It is the only topic that unites policymakers in the United States, from the Democrats to the Republicans and everyone in between. China is seen as an existential threat to US power positioning globally. And this affects everything. And you see it. You can see it in the way the new administration is positioning itself. And when we look at the global patents report on AI, I find it I love patents because they're your crystal ball about the future. Patents show you what to expect in the next 5 to 10 years. And the last global patents report shows, first of all, an exponential growth of patents, which is expected when it comes to AI, because the level of investment is also growing exponentially. But when you see where those patents are registered, 61% of patents came out of China. 21% came out of the United States. 2% came out of the European Union plus UK. 16% from the rest of the world. And what we're seeing now with Stargate, the $500 billion investment in the United States between public and private sector to invest in AI, the biggest public-private project in history, even bigger than the moon landing, when you adjust the amounts that we're talking about. When you hear President von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, last week in Davos, saying the AI race is on, and Europe saying we're going to get rid of regulation, which let's see how of red tape. Let's see how that goes, and state-led China, which led to what we saw in the news with DeepSeek. And DeepSeek is just one reminder that the AI game is here to stay. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to influence our lives. And we cannot build our policies based on current premises. We have to prepare for multiple scenarios moving forward, which that kind of future thinking is the hardest part. I love futurists because they have the best job in the world, because nobody knows if they're going to be right or wrong, and nobody looks back to see if they were right or wrong. But somebody has to do that job. And it's extremely important for those developing policies to be able to have that scenario building process, but also keeping in mind that there may be an X factor, an unexpected factor that we have to take into account.
Right.
The second angle I would like to address is one that concerns me deeply, and is at the core of the work that we do both at Unite and at Health AI, which is the issues of inequities. Because what we're seeing is AI has the promise of generating tremendous equity, especially in the field of health. But the way we're seeing AI being developed, the way we're seeing it being deployed, and the way we are seeing companies being built up around the world, the Global South is once again absolutely absent. And the patent report is just one piece of that. And so the digital divide, which already exists, may actually grow exponentially. And when we see that, for example, in Africa, is where you have the most expensive access to data, the most expensive access to energy, two things you need tremendous amounts of to generate AI. So this continent that has been constantly left behind is once again starting with a whole bunch of hurdles. When we're talking about leveling the playing field, it's a joke when it comes to this space, right? We are far from leveling the playing field. And so a lot needs to be done, not to speak about the absence of capacities in the country to address those issues. And this, of course, will reflect upon health, because inevitably this inequality will generate further poverty, and poverty is the greatest driver of health. Moreover, AI is one of the greatest hopes we have for low and middle income countries to leapfrog to the future when it comes to redesigning health systems. AI is a tool. It is not the solution. And we should use it to rethink the way we deliver care, the way we think of prevention, the way we think of health promotion, so that low and middle income countries in particular can benefit from the absence of healthcare workers to use technology to overcome this and actually help those in the richer countries to see how we can do things differently. And to do that, we need that capacity, which is not there. Couple comments just to add. I'm also concerned about the climate issue, which I think will affect diplomacy. I've mentioned energy. Every time we do a query on ChatGPT, we're using the same amount of energy that it would take to charge nearly 200 phones. And we're using half a liter of water to cool down the data centers. So do the math. We're talking about billions of queries per year around the world, multiple large language models around the world. A lot of technology is coming out that I think will use much less energy and water, but still, once again, this feeds into the diplomatic discussions inevitably. And also we know that all of the scarce resources, the inequities, they will force further migration because people migrate because they're looking for a better life. And migration is one of the biggest challenges that governments are facing today. And so this, I would believe, is something we have to take into account. The last point I want to make is about deception. Politics has become very much influenced by deception, disinformation, misinformation, deep fakes, mobilizing mass movements or fake mass movements to justify political action. We have an idea as humans that what I see, I can believe in. But can we trust what we see anymore? Right? It's not necessarily true. And in an age of AI where this powerful technology can fall in any kind of hands, and there are bad actors in bad governments that we cannot ignore, are using this technology to disrupt societies. They are using it as a weapon. And this is something that we have to embrace and be ready to be able to address. And finally, it's very difficult. Anders was talking about negotiation. You know, when I started in I was elected for the first time in parliament. So I did 20 years of public service, but my first time in national parliament was in 2011. Facebook was still seen as a positive thing. People, you know, we were all beginning, we were learning, we were toddlers in the social media age. And then I was 12 years and basically an active in national politics. And from the beginning to the end of the term, the difference is tremendous. Because at the beginning, I could have differences with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. But there were some things that we could agree on, the facts. There were basic facts that the science provided us. We could disagree then how to use the science. We could disagree on the paths to take forward. But now I'm sitting in front of someone, and between us we have a table. And I say, this is a table. And he says, no, it isn't. It's a horse. And I say, how do I deal with that, right? It's not a table, it's a horse. No, it's not a horse, it's a table. And that's the end of the conversation. But that's the state of affairs, which makes diplomacy extremely hard. So I think we have tremendous challenges, but I also am very hopeful because I can tell you, dealing with diplomatic corps around the world, I see they're trying to gear up, they're trying to learn, and typically they are moderated people. And we need moderation and good sense more than anything.
Can I ask you a follow-up? In the way that when you're dealing with countries, both in terms of UNITE or the Health AI Agency, have there been countries that are asking you, how do we use AI for diplomacy or for developing some language, or is that on the radar screen for any of them?
So in terms of international relations, I wouldn't say most governments are there, to be honest.
No,
at least from our interactions. There are a few, obviously, right, that are very advanced. But I feel that most are very early stages.
Early stages. Okay, good. Thank you so much for that, Ricardo. Now, I'm going to ask Tim. He's on the screen. Well, I am on the screen. In fact, my back is on the screen. But Tim, you must be somewhere there. And we're going to ask you to comment with your experience in the area of working in governance at WHO, and also obviously now being in a country and working with the government, where this field is going and use of AI in diplomacy or future use of it, and its governance and all the challenges that we heard so far. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Gary, and happy Lunar New Year to my colleagues on the panel and members of the audience. You know, it's actually really interesting, I think, and quite helpful, the preceding speakers, Anders and Ricardo. I think the scene that you set there is going to sort of help. I've thrown some of my pages away because I'll react to things that you said. What I thought I would do, drawing down on a real world experience, or the real world experiences I've had in my previous life, as you mentioned, Gary, when I had the honor to be the director of the WHO Governing Bodies Department in headquarters in Geneva. And, you know, as was mentioned by previous colleagues, AI is something that's certainly been discussed really increasingly over the last, I think, 5 or 6 years in both formal and informal settings within the WHO governing bodies context, from both our member states and also amongst the Secretariat, who are primarily, you know, looking for efficiency gains. I have to say, and it comes back to Anders' point, we undertook a review of what was happening some 4 years ago now, what was happening in terms of use of AI in other intergovernmental fora, particularly focusing on UN partners, etc. And it became quite apparent to me, and will be of no surprise to Anders, I suspect, that when we came to WHO, I would have to say it was really the most conservative of all the UN agencies in terms of how willing member states were at that time to embrace new methods and technologies. And I'll come back to that a little bit more at the end. However, as part of that review process, we came up with kind of 3 primary areas where member states were asking us to take some actions, and they're around the more administrative uses of AI to support the governing body processes, the language services use, if you like, and the use around AI for analytics and research. At that time, when we first undertook this review, there was really no sense of willingness amongst the membership to use an AI tool to produce draft text, to use an AI tool for collating or providing coherence across drafts of their resolutions and decisions. But I'll come back to that in a moment also. So I think where we have seen some positive movement is certainly in the ability to use some AI tools to improve the research and the analytics. For example, looking at trends in not only WHO, but other global intergovernmental fora on topics or resolutions and decisions that have been proposed and adopted and implemented. To look at the number of similar resolutions over time, for example. Currently, if you want to examine the WHO database for all the myriad of resolutions and decisions that go back to 1948 through our governing bodies processes, it's really quite laborious. There's been some inkling and tinkling around the corners of looking at the impact of proposed WHO resolutions, and that's around potential health impact. There was some discussion about looking at potentially economic impacts of various resolutions and decisions, how that work is really in its infancy. Some of the sort of more analytical areas, administrative areas, is potentially using an AI tool to synthesize the submissions from various stakeholders, particularly useful if there is a public online type consultation where the words of member states are not as important if it's just trying to get an overall sort of summary of views from a consultative process. In terms of the administrative aspects in particular, automation of our administrative tasks is being implemented as I speak, in fact, with the Executive Board of WHO starting next week. And document management, we're using new document management systems which have an AI basis. Automatic translations is something that's been implemented in the last 2 years in WHO. Likewise, some discussion around AI interpretation. However, fully understanding for both translation and interpretation, there are the issues that for example, French, English, and to some degree Spanish are reasonably well handled by AI tools, but Russian Federation, Russian, Chinese, and Arabic are still of works in progress. That's not only just for the accuracy, there's issues around and ensuring that the terms, etc., being used are coherent. It's also ensuring that the database of the medical and other related terms are up to date and readily available for those AI tools. One thing that we have used before my departure last year from headquarters was using AI tools to provide a plain English summary of the negotiations, which could be then used by our communications team, for example, for their purposes, not within the governing body's purpose itself. And I think coming to Ricardo's point, where we do see some potential benefit, and member states are nervous about this for the points Ricardo was just saying, I think that the increase in some use of AI tools within governing body fora increases transparency, and not all member states necessarily want transparency in some of those discussions. Just as context, most of the intergovernmental discussions that take place in a forum like the WHO are closed discussions. The negotiations prior to them going to the governing body itself are often, depending on the topic, of course, quite contentious. If I come down to the specific issue about using AI in intergovernmental negotiations themselves, I call the intergovernmental negotiations between WHO member states a holy enterprise, because that's really the way that I feel that the member states, which is their sovereign right, of course, take on board the drafting of resolutions and the negotiations that go through them. And as we come into an increasingly political, as health has become increasingly more politicized, as politics are crossing many intergovernmental fora, something that really wasn't a major issue in the health world when I first took over in the GBS role, the governing bodies role, some 9 years ago now. But in the last few years, obviously, through the fractious geopolitical world we're living in, we're seeing these geopolitical issues being played out on the floor of an assembly or an executive board that's real mandate is to prioritise and discuss health matters. Member states are very jealous of their texts. I have to say that certain delegations and certain negotiators, I feel that they see that as their job, their role, and without that process, they may be out of a job. And I could say likewise, AI tools are somewhat threatening to the administrative and language services teams within the Secretariat. I'm going to preempt, Gary, your ask of me, and you're welcome to have another ask too, but where do I see things in the next five years in terms of specifically around WHO, but I think it broadens out to other UN processes and other health fora. An increased acceptance of AI tools for interpretation and translation, increased acceptance of AI for analytical tools, as these are really being able to help member states better understand where their proposed resolution may fit in the global health environment, and an increased acceptance to use AI tools for mapping and research purposes. Do we see yet a first draft of a proposed resolution or a decision? I think we will. I think a member state could do worse than use AI to prepare a first draft that then went to member states for further consultation. However, there will, I believe, still be a reluctance to embrace AI to really be utilised within the governing body processes for itself. I think these negotiations are so highly specific from a technical perspective, and even more so now, or at the same time from a political perspective. But back to I think it was Ricardo's point, the world is changing. WHO has been, in my view, very, very conservative, both our membership and within the Secretariat itself. And I think we will be forced to change, even if it is through reacting to situations like we are experiencing in the last week or so, where there will need to be efficiency gains for us to keep moving forward. I really think, from what I've seen, member states, once they see and have some comfort, and maybe it's also relevant to Ricardo's point about trust. Once that trust is built, I think, and once member states are more comfortable that at the end of the day, the negotiators still own the text. Using AI tools may make their job easier. It'll be a process that will be better embraced moving forward. Thanks, Gary. I'll hand the floor back to you.
Great, thank you for that. I do have a follow-up quick, and of course we know more about the health kind of fora and WHO being the cornerstone of that, but are you aware of other UN or other processes where there's some other ways how AI is used or AI is governed? If you have any insight into that beyond just health-focused diplomacy.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I mean, I think in terms of the administrative and language services components, WHO is either at the forefront or in line with the other UN agencies that we reviewed some years ago. I've not heard of any agency that's sort of gone further in terms of using AI as part of the nuts and bolts governance, if you like. Having said that, I haven't been there for the last 8 months, and perhaps some other agencies have moved forward in that regard, and maybe Ricardo's got a better insight into that. I do know, however, that in some less political fora, some of the economic bodies, the regional economic entities, are really considering using AI for some of their processes. And we had a good discussion with the ASEAN during the ASEAN meeting that was hosted by Laupedia last year. They are one entity for which seem to be far more willing to embrace AI than perhaps the conservative WHO membership I'm speaking to and familiar with. Thanks, Gary. Back to you.
Thanks for that insight. Let's come back to you and come back to this issue of climate and health. Why I'm saying come back, because it came up, because it looks like climate, health, you're working on the intersection of both. So there's a lot of promise for AI to help in that and reduce the silos, right? But then there's another side to it, which how much of energy and climate and water it eats, right, from the other side. So from where you are with your experience and what you see, and really from the holistic lens of this intersection, and which we do need to have to really deal with the crisis, what are your views on this, Dr. Jamila?
Thank you very much, Gary. Only you and Jonathan can make me miss a reunion dinner because I'm half Chinese. So, Gong Si Fa Sai, Sinian Kuala, to those who celebrate. So it's great to be here. I think, first of all, let me just say I come from a planetary health center in Malaysia, and planetary health is a 10-year-old kind of framework where it's looking at the intersections between the health of the planet and health of human civilization. So it really calls for us to re-examine, equity as a fundamental, but the impact of human behaviors and human actions on the planet that will have an impact on health. So it calls really for a multi-systems approach. And when you talk about, say, planetary health diplomacy, those intersections that you mentioned about climate and pollution, energy use, and so forth, I come back to what, Anders' approach is. It's not planetary health diplomacy, it's diplomacy for planetary health, right? And therefore, the end goal you want is sustainability, it's planetary health. And how you get there is, the diplomacy. And I think more than ever, particularly right now in this time where we have both just come back from Davos and where, you know, the atmosphere was one that was of a bit of confusion as well, right? On the recent announcements in the United States. And I think that more than ever, we feel diplomacy is critical, but more than ever, it's challenged. Because there's almost like a license to walk away now from things that you've committed to, and gives a license to those, you know, who may not have liked to agree to some resolutions, but now that, you know, a major country walks away, you know, there are big question marks on whether others will stay. So that's maybe on the political front. So let me first of all go back to WHO, right? WHO leads us as a larger global health community, and I think, you know, the work that Dr. Maria Neira has, you know, led on the work program WHO on climate and health, and I think it's just something we need to applaud, because setting the standards and moving forward. But that's just the beginning, right? WHO have a focus on climate change and larger environmental impacts on health, but what does this really look like? And obviously, you know, there have been multiple intergovernmental successes on what I would term planetary health, you might call One Health, you know, basically the health of people in relation to the environment they live in. And the amendments to the international health regulations, I think this is something that, and the climate and health resolution that the 77th World Health Assembly were pivotal and advances the UN Biodiversity Conference on cohesive and equitable access and benefit sharing of digital sequencing data and so forth. And, you know, Ricardo and I have been working on this global panel for public health convention, and it's all linked. And this is why I think, you know, that holistic approach is extremely important. But now we have all these agreements, these decisions, these resolutions. How do we make sure they're consistent? Because, you know, how do we make sure they function as parts of a whole rather than further fragment the multilateral space? So, you know, in my country, for example, the health negotiators go in, not knowing what the climate negotiators have agreed on, not knowing what the biodiversity negotiators have agreed on. I'm sure it's not just my country. I think many countries in the world, because the siloed approaches, and this is where, you know, planetary health is trying to break those silos and call for a systems approach. And I think here is where AI might be helpful. I think that we have, you know, right now we have researchers working on see how can artificial intelligence be used to track language across these agreements, right? Leverage cross-cutting themes to bring about multilateral reform. So, you know, so that health doesn't just sit with WHO. It sits with Rio Conventions. It sits with the World Trade Organization, WIPO, Law of the Sea, and many other frameworks for public international law. And AI has this opportunity to map these negotiating streams and determine where, as advocates, can most effectively insert language into these agreements to bring about the objective of what I call planetary health. And, you know, we are an institution in the Global South, you know, dedicated to multilateralism, so, and also at the national level. So we are pushing hard, right? Malaysia is a chairman of ASEAN this year to take that leadership and, you know, and I think we have an obligation to use our knowledge and our skills to move this effort forward. And ASEAN as a regional bloc has done some remarkable things lately. It's looked at, for example, carbon pricing for the region, something that is really very positive, looking now at energy grids, right? And I think this is something we can be quite proud of. So, and a few maybe examples like AI co-pilots in Taiwan, right, have been shown to greatly reduce burdens on the health workforce. I think there are many examples some of us in this room may have. The Brazilian startups that are providing healthcare to 30 million patients using AI-assisted diagnosis platforms. Ricardo has spoken so eloquently about, you know, many of the opportunities there. So I think that in relation to diplomacy, there are great opportunities for AI. It can fight misinformation and disinformation, we hope. Although I must tell you that it's very funny. Last night I put on ChatGPT, I put my husband's name in. He's also a doctor. gave me a photograph of the orthopedic surgeon. So I told him, I'm married to this man. So he was not amused. But basically, it still gets it wrong, right? It still gets it wrong. So so can AI help to educate people on how their daily choices impact the planet, potentially leading to disease outcomes that are harmful to us? Can it also help us to choose better diets? Singapore is doing this brilliantly. There are apps that you can use in Singapore that you scan and they'll tell you at the supermarket, maybe you need to eat something as an alternative, right? Or it's tracking your movements and then saying, oh, well done, you've done X number of steps. Here's some points for you. You can redeem as coupons. So there's incentivizing the use of big data, AI, and so forth, right? And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge the geopolitical uncertainties around the world today. And I think diplomacy in the 20th century is not equipped for the challenges we have today. We need to rethink diplomacy. We need to re-look at how we educate on diplomacy. You mentioned, Anders, you were the global health diplomat for Sweden without being trained in diplomacy. I've been thrown into diplomacy, in the UN multilateral systems, not realizing massive egos I have to deal with. So the first lesson in diplomacy, as my boss used to tell me, is listen. The second thing she told me before I left the UN, she said, maybe you need to start an ego massaging institute, right? So it really is true. It's about understanding human behaviors, because no amount of knowledge in AI is going to prepare you for the massive egos you will have to deal with. And that, I think, good diplomacy is about humility. It's about being able to listen, also being very smart in massaging egos. And I think that
I think I'm going to use that in the future. I'll have to quote you for that.
Okay. And I think that, again, I come back to the fact that one of the greatest lessons we are witnessing, which I think AI is helping us to realize, that we need to understand how to communicate science, how to advocate with our public audience. We can't work off the assumptions that the health argument works for people. I promise you it doesn't. It's the economic argument that wakes people up. And we cannot assume people care about the environment, just as much as we cannot assume that people care about their neighbors on the other side of the country border. And what you mentioned earlier, Ricardo, about Facebook and all that, how polarized the world is. And these are, if you haven't, please look at the Global Risk Report. It was just released in the World Economic Forum. Number one, highest risk in the next 2 years is conflict, right? And number two is misinformation, disinformation. And then in the longer term, it's all climate environment related, right? So maybe AI can help us identify the arguments that do work, the messaging that compels people to act. And this is where we need the behavioral scientists and other clever people, because if we cannot solve that puzzle, we won't be able to solve much at all. Thanks, Gary.
Great. Can I ask you a follow-up? Quick. You mentioned we're not ready for that diplomacy, right? For the 21st century diplomacy, we're all thrown in. And you mentioned sort of education or training. There is a tendency to do more work in training more health diplomats or training diplomats, etc. But obviously, from where you came from in terms of breaking the silos and approaching this not just from a health perspective, do you have any thoughts more on how we should, I don't want to use the word train, but I have no other word to use, to how to equip us and those current ones and future ones? Any additional thoughts into that?
Well, Anders is doing some great work at Karolinska already, and I think we are beginning to do some training. We have a program called GH Gaps in partnership with Georgetown University in the US, but also we want to work with you, Gary, and others. And it's GH Gaps means Global Health Governance as Public Service. So what we want to do is actually bring people into a room and start, doing things using cultural nuances as well. Teaching diplomacy in Southeast Asia is very different from teaching diplomacy in the West, because generally Southeast Asians are they're very reserved, right? They won't tell you what they think immediately. So this is where the use of AI, the use of technology is going to be able to democratize the voice of people who are less likely to stand up and speak. And I think I say this, I'm probably one of the most outspoken Southeast Asians. People have asked me whether I'm Dutch. I mean, that's the ultimate. But I said to and this is really true, right? I come from a family of 13 siblings, and I'm number 13. And my father used to say to me at a very young age, your voice is tiny. The only way you can get heard is to use your brain and your diplomatic skills, telling a 3-year-old child this, right? And so I think that, so because for survival, you've had to kind of speak up in a large family, but how do we now bring the strength, the humility, the strength, the culture that we have into diplomacy? So this is what we're trying to do. And if any of you are new to Southeast Asia, the #1 diplomatic tool is food. Yeah. Right? The best discussions in diplomacy happen around the dining table, and I think these things sometimes are not taught in diplomatic schools, but these are cultural nuances that you need to know.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. Thank you. And let's move to our last speaker. And you have a bit of an advantage. You heard everyone so far already. So you can situate your comments in that, and particularly how things are unfolding, let's say in Thailand, and how you're dealing with both digital health and AI issues in terms of sort of addressing inequities, but also how it links to diplomacy. Over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Gary. Yeah, my name is, may I introduce myself, because I am just only a little one who are not in the global stage. Yeah, my name is Dr. Nichanan Tanti Siriwit. I am the Deputy Director from Bureau of Digital Health, Ministry of Public Health, Thailand. Yeah. It is a very great honor for me to let me join this session and have a chance to listen to all very great speakers today. Yeah. First of all, I would like to Happy Chinese New Year. Actually, I also have a Chinese national a little bit, but come to live in Thailand since my grandfather. Yeah. So, and thank you again to let me join today. Today, my responsibility for this session will share my Thailand digital health for what we do in our real life experience. Uh, Actually, I think in every country start with the same thing, that we look for the challenges in our country. For our country in Thailand, I will let me concept you for the CIPP concept: input, process, output, and outcome. For the outcome, the final outcome of health in Thailand, in the aspect of Ministry of Public Health, we also in the same to sustainability of the healthcare system. For nowadays, we use digital to come to help us in many aspects, but two sides of the coin. Digital have challenges. Digital is one of the challenges in health challenges in the world also. So it is quite difficult for us to make people, patients, to learn to use digital, and also providers to use digital for all and make it be equity in our country. Yeah. For input, in our conceptual, it is challenges. As I said before, that challenges is global challenges from the grand changes, healthcare system, elderly populations, or climate change, and so on. For our national, we have limitation, especially from budget limitation. Yeah, which I think in government or in public sector, it is quite limitation, not same as private sector. And also the personnel structure for health department. We don't have high technology personnel like in the engineer department like this. So this is our limitation. However, strength for Ministry of Public Health to implement the digital health is that we have a strong policy for digital health since about 10 years ago. And also after COVID-19, the digital health come to be the main point to engage people and patients in our health system, like vaccination that Thailand proved it by Thailand is in the first fifth position that many worldwide countries accept that the healthcare system among COVID-19 situation is the best 5 country in the world. And also we have a network in our country system. We have about around 1,000 hospitals in Ministry of Public Health, so we can get big data in our system. So we can use the data to learn or to make other healthcare service to make people and our population to get benefits from this. And the third one that is our strength is partnership. We have a good partnership with university and also private sector. So with the limitation, the main limitation that is a budget, we try to use our strength to get off the limitation. And in this is challenge when we use all of the challenges, limitations, strength together, we come to think about the process to implement digital health innovation or AI or things to get to make people use this one for their healthcare system. We use triangles of the digital health. Yeah, one is service. We think about that patient journey, provider journey, and service along when people come to hospital, what people go, what people get, and we think that what technology we can put in along this journey, and AI, what AI can use for patient journey to help patient more comfortable to get health care or provider to get more convenience to work in the healthcare system. Yeah. And then the third one is regulation. For triangle, one is service. The second is technology. And the third one is regulation, because law and regulation is very important, especially in AI and digital. We use governance data governance and digital governance that established in our ministry to control and regulate it. And the output today, nowadays, we have some AI using like use case in our real life. The first one is for imaging study. We use AI to screening the abnormality in X-ray. Nowadays, we use in chest X-ray, and next time will be retina in our eyes and in brain to help a rural hospital or rural service can have AI to help screening abnormality. And after that, we'll make, if they screen that have abnormality, they will consult to the specialist, because the specialist is quite limited in our country also as well. Yeah. And the next one is using AI chatbot to make it be a consultant with people. And this make people, because nowadays everyone use smartphone, right? When we use smartphone, we can talk or we can chat in the smartphone, in our application. We use AI chatbot to help especially in the psychologist, in the psychiatry, or to manage with the people who get stress or anxiety. That is very useful. And next step, we will use it for NCD's disease to, like, when people want to know about when they when they test their blood sugar, they can know that what they should do, should go to hospital, or it is normal and can stay inside their home, or it is abnormality to go to hospital. Yeah. And this all of the AI we use nowadays will be advancing and collaborate with other our partnership, yeah, in the university and other medical faculty. So in the final, we think that AI using in our Ministry of Public Health will make patient and people will get more healthcare accessibility and equity in our country. Yeah, and this is what real life experience I would like to share. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask a quick question.
Yes.
So when you work within the ministry, those who are, let's say, going on behalf of Thailand and representing Thailand in WHO, other negotiations, etc., sometimes do they come to you with help to say, can we use AI to, let's say, get a better sense of what's happening in Thailand on this issue, that issue quickly? Have you had a request like that?
Actually, it is the AI and digital health is also established in the strategy of the Ministry of Public Health.
Yeah.
It is a 20-year strategy.
Yeah.
So for the high level manager, they also have they also see that this is the part that important. For us that request, we like we do like bottom up to the policy makers.
Right.
Yeah.
So you use
yes.
that data to provide
Yes.
each.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's good because I think that's also important how these negotiators come
Yeah.
equipped with the right information and AI could help them be even better informed of their own position. Well, we're hoping.
And moreover, we try to set up the AI unit in our Ministry of Public Health that will including of make a health workforce or personal competency for AI using. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So let's quickly give a round of applause to everyone. Thank you all. This was great. Now it's your turn here and online to address something that we may have missed, bring some angle to this discussion that we have not thought about, comment on, or ask questions. So we have a few minutes to do that, and including those online are able to send their questions. I see one hand already.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank everyone. The presentations were terrific. Dennis Carroll from Chief Scientist at URC. The arrows, if we were looking AI and global health diplomacy, the arrows were all pointing from AI to global health diplomacy. How can AI be a tool for global health diplomacy? What I'm concerned about is what does global health diplomacy in making sure AI becomes usable, a tool that is usable, and the issues of regulating or putting guardrails on AI. I think it was either Ricardo Yu or Andrews Yu made reference to whether or not the tool is going to achieve equity and sustainability. The algorithms that are developed, are they developed to meet the needs of the wealthy of the world, or are they intended to meet the needs of everyone in the world, that there's enough diversity and sensitivity in the algorithms to be responsive to the needs of the poorest of the poor, the richest of the richest? And that is not going to spontaneously happen. This is not happening in governments. This is happening in the private sector. And this is a private sector that's even more cowboyish than most within the private sector. They're accountable to no one unless they have shareholders. That's it. So how can diplomacy make sure that what comes out of the artificial intelligence industry meets the needs of the people at large than the few? How do you manage that? And when you make reference to Stargate, Stargate is, I suspect, under the current administration within the United States, going to be the least regulated partnership imaginable, which means there's $500 billion to unleash maybe the dogs of hell or something else. So how do you use diplomacy, and how do you do that? I know it's inverting the discussion as sort of an isomer of some sort, but how do you do that?
Okay, who wants to take that on? Yes, please, Ricardo. I was hoping you will.
Yeah, thanks for the easy question there, Dennis.
We're actually surprised you're here. So good you're with us.
No, but it's a very important question. And I think that you've touched upon something that is, of course, very core to the work we do at Health AI, but I think it's very core to the requests we're hearing from governments around the world. So COVID represented many shifts in society and in diplomacy. I think the biggest transformation that I saw was many parts of the world generally saying, especially in the low and middle income countries, saying, we won't take the global north telling us what to do anymore. And the only resistance that I ever saw to that shift was because of funding. But now, like today, as we see multiple HIV clinics closing across Africa due to the suspension of US funding, I think this will reinforce a certain rejection to global north support in certain parts of the world. Because predictability, stability are critical factors to build trust, which we are undermining with these kind of attitudes, right? And it's not just the US, let's be honest. The European Union has not been doing its fair share. The European leaders are complaining about migration, but what have they done to avoid people needing to run away from their countries, where we have historical responsibilities in Africa, in Latin America, my country also, Portugal. So this being said, I think we need to build solutions that don't go from Geneva or New York to tell the countries what to do, but actually empower sovereign nations to be able to cope with these challenges themselves. At Health AI, what we're doing is precisely working with governments that are interested to go down that path, and through technical assistance, building the local capacity so that countries can build their own regulatory bodies to assess and validate AI solutions that makes sure that the technologies that are then authorized to enter the system are safe, effective, and quality assured. I believe that this is the role of the state. I don't think it's the role of the state to develop technologies. I believe it is the role of the state to regulate the way those technologies enter the market and to make sure that equity, the principles of responsible AI at large, are taken into account. And so, just like we've done in the pharmaceutical industry and in the medical devices industry, I believe that the state should be the gateway to access to market. We've done it. With pharmaceutical products, nobody questions that the pharma industry has to go to the regulator to get access to market if they want their technology to be used in the health system. When it comes to AI tools to be used in clinical settings, we believe that that same process should be followed. What we can contribute as a global player then is connecting the regulators in a global regulatory network, allowing knowledge sharing, but also what we're building is a global early warning system. And so if there's an AI tool that demonstrates risk here or in Singapore or in Zambia or in Switzerland or in Brazil, that risk or that harm that was identified by one regulator, we are raising a red flag in real time to all regulators. Because we need to have these kind of global interventions to make sure that we avoid harm at scale. And if we do so, then we can build trust towards the technology, then we can scale the technology at a systemic level to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. I'll end by saying this. There's a really interesting book on the topic you asked called Power and Progress. It's a book that looks at the history of technologies over the last 1,000 years. And the book says, over the last millennia, every time a new technology came into the market, those that developed the technology they always said, this is going to save humanity, right? I can think of a few names in our contemporary world that would say that about their own technology, right? What happened? What does the data tell us? And that's what's interesting in this book, is that almost every time the technology, the way it was deployed, led to a concentration of wealth and power and the rise of inequities. The very few examples when technology did not lead to concentration of wealth and power and growing inequalities was when, by design from the start, the technology was conceptually designed and deployed into the market, putting in place at the core the issues of equity, which of course depended on institutional governments and multilaterals getting involved. And so I believe that being still at the beginning of this transformative wave, of this revolution, because it is a revolution that will change everything, we still have a chance. And I believe that that's where governments and private sector need to work together. And I got some hope in Davos, because a lot of the players I used to hear a year ago telling me when I would talk about governance and regulation, they said, oh, it's too early. We need innovation, right? It's always the thing, governance versus innovation. Now the same people came up to me saying, we don't understand. We developed this amazing technology, but ministries of health are not uptaking the technology. I said, I told you so, right? I mean, you need to build health. People are afraid of legal liability. They're afraid of potential harm, of the reputational risks. And health is not the same thing as any other sector. The negative consequence if something goes bad will fall upon the patients. And so people will be responsible for that. And that's the role of the regulators and the state. And so, yes, for once and for all, we need the private sector and the governments to work for the common good.
Add something to that. So you work in Geneva. I know ITU, for example, is looking at ethics, right, in AI, because it's missing. I think the Secretary General has also mentioned it. Even God forbid they'll set up a UN for AI, but it fundamentally we don't have that, the whole ethics and all that. So I think it has to be bottom up, but at a global level, I think you need some kind of resolution, some kind of agreement at a global level that there will be certain ethics. Coming from Malaysia, one of the biggest worries in this region is the AI companies will all come and set up their data centers in our place because it's cheap labor, cheap electricity, and so forth, right? And then you compound the problems of energy usage because at the end of the day, it will be fossil fuel based. So, who's going to speak up about, WHO, you're talking about climate and health, but when are we going to tackle the root of the problem? And then that is confronting the fossil fuel production, because, half of us live in countries where it's state oil. So it's so complex. It requires diplomacy, but it also requires leadership and some hardball that needs to be played, right? To set in place those regulations that you mentioned, because it's not just diplomacy that's going to help.
Okay, Anders, you wanted to comment?
No, just to add that, yes, rules and regulations are important, but then there are human beings as well. And I think we need to bring in that. I mean, Ricardo, you said that politicians, when they get new suggestions in terms of technology, etc., they do not always follow those guidance. And that's exactly what is about politics and diplomacy, that there is another logic to that, which has to do with human beings. And just to bring a little bit more on the diplomacy sort of dimension into this, that AI, I think, is going to both to challenge the whole world around diplomacy and politics, to help, but also to challenge. But there will always be this human dimension to this. Jamila, you mentioned also that, I mean, if we can get consistency in between the Minister of Environment, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Health, yes, but perhaps they don't want that because they would like to disagree. And in politics, it's about disagreeing. So it doesn't matter what if you have the same evidence. Or you might have the perfect text for a resolution, but then one country might just, we do not want to agree because we don't want to have an agreement with another country. And that's psychology. And that's politics. And it doesn't help if we get the perfect. And I was actually Googling here because I remember the quotation about don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And that was actually came from a French philosopher 300 years ago. So I think a little bit the danger with AI here as well, that we're striving, we are moving towards perfection. But let's remember also that there is a human dimension here. If we're going to be able to make progress, we need trust. We need human relationships, and that's what politics is about. So, I mean, we can get help. Sometimes we will be challenged by AI and having too much of information or wrong information. But I think let's remember as well that we need here the partnerships in between technology, knowledge, and people.
Great. So I think there was one hand here, and I have a few questions here. So while, okay, the microphone is there. Yeah, please.
Sure. Mohan Somirapan from Ramadidi Medical School, Mahidol University in Bangkok, Thailand. I have a question, hopefully less difficult than that of Dennis Carroll's. And you just answered a part of my question already. My question is concerned relationship between AI, global health diplomacy, and planetary health. I'm just curious what panelists, opinions on. A lot of people use the clean energy as a kind of bargaining, negotiation issue, rather than pushing for both, having data center to sort of AI, as well as protect the earth, right? It's more like negotiation, how to make things real within the global health diplomacy that concern both health of the population and impact from planetary health, and also advancing the AI, how you see the process that can be optimized, if you will.
So the estimate is that AI will double energy use, right, in the next year or so. And I think your question is spot on. How do you find that balance that AI will do good and which will outweigh the cost that it will, harm the planet or people? Because ultimately, if you harm the planet, you will harm people's health as well. So this is tricky because for many countries in the developing world or middle income countries, to get out of the middle income trap, it's about foreign direct investments and so forth, right? So, I come from Malaysia. We're going to have an explosion of data centers in our country. So these are the conversations I have with the Ministry of Economy and so forth to say, how do you ensure that the energy that you use, there are incentives for you to have green or renewable energy use for those data centers and as a requisite, because you can't come to the global south and think that everything is cheaper here and you can do that. I think we have to take many lessons. I was just thinking just now as you were talking about DeepSeek, that when China, sneezes, the whole world gets a cold, right? Just in the couple of days. But just in a couple of days, I mean, look at the news that's exploding around, as though it's something so bad, right? Is the DeepSeek situation. But coming fundamentally to what you said about equity, about rights. If you ask questions of DeepSeek, some questions, particularly which have human rights elements, you don't get the answer. So, let's also acknowledge that, there are still a lot of challenges if we want it to be a really open, transparent, equitable form of data platform. So I think that bargaining, and I think advocates, scientists, health practitioners, we just have to keep going at our governments and saying, here's the evidence, here are the things that you need to be looking out for, here are the risks, and show them alternative pathways to be able to get that income, bring the business in, but also not do further damage. The data now is quite compelling that it will outweigh the benefits outweigh the risk. So I think, it's a lot of mathematics that has to go in to look at cost savings, energy usage and so forth.
Okay. I have a few more questions online. Oh, Ricardo.
No, I'm just going to say, because one thing that I always think about, and you're absolutely right, is how we measure sustainability from a climate perspective also in the future, because we just saw Microsoft is trying to rehabilitate in New Jersey a nuclear power plant, which has zero carbon emissions. So if we look just at carbon, then we'll say that nuclear is the way to go, which is the position of many tech companies. And there's a lot of discussion about the new nuclear technologies, but I'm saying that this revolution is affecting basically every area, and energy is probably one of the biggest.
Yeah, as my opinion, I think for making policy in the country, in each country, it is quite a slow process to make it success. So one thing that is a key success factor that I learned from COVID-19 situation is collaboration, especially between private sectors, public sector, and also specialists who are in both public and private. Because government may have limitation for the specialist health workforce, as I mentioned before. So I think collaboration especially inside the country, and make policy to solve pain point problem. And if we think more that we can solve pain point for all stakeholders, it will make it success more faster. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Were there questions here? Okay, there's one here. While the mic is coming, I have a few other questions online. One is, how can AI help dissemination of complex health data in simple language to general populations? Maybe I can ask that Dr. Nishanang from your experience. What initiatives are in place of or being planned to harmonize AI for health negotiations? And is this even possible given the current and growing digital divide between countries? Whoever wants to take that one. And okay, and the last one is, how will future of AI help navigate complex global health funding challenges like current withdrawal of US from WHO? Tim, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want, you can take that one. And we have one more here.
My question is, maybe perhaps because diplomacy is really about coming to the same platform as equals, that there could be a certain agreed terminology that, that cannot be contextualized. Like what you say that's it, and that means the same to me and everyone. Just case point, because I was in a movement before that we call Natural Capital Accounting Alliance. So what we did was, if we could get all the accountants of the 1,000 organizations of the world, the top 1,000 companies in the world, to report accurately their use of natural capital, water, land, power, and all of that. And these terminologies are the same as to anybody. You can't say, oh, my company is in Thailand. Oh, my, there's no contextualizing that. It means the same to everything, to everyone. Then perhaps that would be like everybody could come on the same platform where what you mean is what you mean. And there's no vagueness to it. There's no argument to it. And perhaps then everybody will have like an equal footing when they come to negotiations.
Okay.
So I got excited when I heard your question, because this was just discussed in Davos. And Emmanuel, who used to be the CEO of Danone, is now leading the accountants came together and said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So what they've done now, they're working towards something called nature positive, and looking at how you actually measure exactly what you said, and how can it appear in the P&L, of companies, so that you can actually hold them accountable. Because the big problem, of course, is the greenwashing that is happening, but also green hushing, which is as problematic, right? And I think that is already in place. People are starting to work on this. So I think if you are involved in this, I would be very happy to connect you to the people who are doing it. But it's a way forward, because when accountants come in, they're more objective, and then they can actually get concrete quantitative measurements, right?
Yeah. We have on our group, we're saying that the accountants will save the world.
Okay. Let's yeah.
Just one more word on the terminology. I have a long background in WHO in the past, and two comments on this. First, I mean, if I look from a WHO point of view, I mean, WHO is both doing political negotiations, but also they are the norm standard setting agency of the world. And norms and terminology should not be politically negotiated. So that could be one take on this, that sometimes, and there has been a tendency that member states want actually to negotiate norms and terminology. And my view is they should not. On the same time, if I look back historically, the UNGAS that happened in New York 2000 on HIV/AIDS set the framework for the indicators, the terminology, what are we going to do and how we're going to measure progress on HIV/AIDS was extremely useful for countries across the world. But there is also, I think today, some of the more difficult issues that can have to do with climate, they can have to do with sexual reproductive health and rights. Those are politically sensitive issues. And to get agreements here in terminology, possibly difficult. And you can have the evidence saying that this is the right terminology. But again, what I've said, countries do not want to agree. So, I mean, one needs to think a little bit in terms of here when we speak about terminology from a technical, and I would really advise make terminology technical and not political issues.
But health is very political, Anders. It really is, yeah. I want to answer one of the questions you
Yes, please.
raised about how do you bring together the different resolutions in the multilateral system. This is exactly what I was saying. There's so many different, there's fragmentation, right, of law, of resolutions and so forth. So one of the things we have started to do, and we have a very smart fellow with us now doing this, is also working with the International Law Commission. Now, how do you start aligning and finding the connections between those different points, that I mentioned law of the sea, the biodiversity COP, resolutions on digital sequencing and so on and so forth. So it's still nascent, but I think we need to involve bodies like International Law Commission that understands the legal frameworks better than us. Some people ask me, why do you need to have so many COPs? Why can't we just have one COP and then have a section on climate, on biodiversity and other things, right? But inherently, it's also about power. So, let's not be naive. We say that it shouldn't be politicized, but it is political. We say that this is about technicalities. It's about, still also about power. And in member states, we have been through this in negotiating with member states. There will always be somebody who wants to be different because they don't like what somebody else is saying. So this is when the ego massaging comes in, right? And finding common ground. And I think that finding common ground is sometimes, it sounds easy, but it is so difficult. But it's not impossible. So there has been opportunities for that.
Great. So there were a few other questions. So I want to see if people, panelists want to react to that quickly. We have a few minutes. We'll try to do some summary and some next steps. Yeah.
Okay, so I will take the question about how can AI help with dissemination of complex health data to simple language to general population. As we know that AI is one of the tools that can use for transform from the difficult data, maybe in other language that we are unfamiliar to the national or the standard data. This is one point that AI can help. And for the other, like when we have a plenty of data, like in a case, in one case in hospital, take time about 3 months along in patient department, we can use AI to summarize from the long and plenty of data to be a conclusion or a small important conclusion. So I think that this is quite very useful for data.
Right.
Yeah.
So Ricardo and Tim, additional points to the questions asked or anything you want to add, and then we'll do a quick summary. Ricardo, you go first, and then Tim.
Well, being my last intervention, thank you again for this conversation. I think one very good conclusion from this meeting is that we all have to go to Stockholm to do Anders' course because we're learning, or to Kuala Lumpur.
Or Toronto.
Yeah. So there are a whole bunch of so just here we have good training that can be provided in these changing times. What I'm trying to say, we have to keep up the pace and we have to invest in our lifelong learning, no matter what position we have. And this applies to everyone because it is a changing world. And I think that's a very important message. On the issue of language, maybe mentioning, because it's about the usage of AI to support us in these efforts, I chair an academic collaborative based in Berlin called the Global Health Policy Lab, which you can find at based on legislation that does exist in the field of health, to help anyone generate legislation for their own context. So if you're in a country that needs a national diabetes plan or a national cancer plan or legislation in that area, the tool will the goal is for the tool to be able to generate something adapted to your own epidemiological, cultural, legal frameworks. And this, I think, is quite unique in the sense that we are providing a draft legislation. I can tell you from my experience at Unite, it's one of the biggest challenges we have. It's very easy to convince people, as we've done, that they should embrace universal health coverage. But then they need to write the legislation and they tell us, we don't know how. And, you know, multilateral organizations have a hard time having resources to respond to all of these requests, to be able to use the power of AI, to give that power to the citizen, from the legislator to the journalist to the patient advocate, to be able to do that, to advocate in their own language, adapted to their own reality. I think this is extremely powerful. And hopefully this will avoid us constantly reinventing the wheel as we're constantly doing. So we can actually learn from the best practices and make sure that we're avoiding mistakes others have made. And that in the field of policy happens a lot, unfortunately. The other thing that the Harvard-based team has done, they've already developed a foundational tool where you can actually drag and drop PDF format national cancer plans. That's where we started, to test the quality of the legislation. So automatically, as soon as you drag and drop into the tool, it generates a spider web graph, and it gives you a report saying the strengths and weaknesses of your legislation. So this gives you tremendous power based on international experience. One last note as we end, because you mentioned about using technology to incentivize good behavior, right? And so you used the example of counting steps for then social credits. I think these examples are great, but a word of caution, if I may, as we put in these examples, because you are running public health in your country, cautionary tale here. I was having a call on Zoom the other day, and a colleague precisely in this region had his phone on a swing, and it was going back and forth, and it was bothering me. And I said, "I'm sorry, I have to interrupt the meeting. Why do you have your phone going back and forth on the swing?" And he says, "Oh, if I do 10,000 steps, I get a premium for my insurance." So,
oh my, okay. Okay, no Zoom and steps. That's the moral of that story. Okay, Tim, any comments from you?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I'll just touch very briefly. I think there was a question on the use of AI to help support the funding gaps that agencies are increasingly facing, and in particular WHO, but other UN partners as well. I mean, the immediate response there is in relationship to having a large, or rather large, I guess, upfront investment in these new innovative technologies, and then having a transition with the existing human workforce moving forward, and particularly in the areas of translation, interpretation, and précis writers. An interesting statistic, I think, is that over the last 5 years, and we're now in 2025, we saw a 300% increase in the number of words, i.e. the number of documents that were being produced for our governing bodies meetings, the number of resolutions and decisions that were being presented to the governing bodies had just exponentially increased, which therefore required an even greater number of human translators, teams of interpreters, précis writers. In the governing bodies, we actually had, for many, many years, individuals sitting in the room writing what member states and other stakeholders were contributing to the discussions. So, you know, looking at eventually reducing the number of staff positions and the associated costs, whilst there is a human face to that, of course, as well, if it's done in an appropriate manner with a phasing out over time. This is one area we've already assessed within the WHO context provides us an opportunity for huge cost savings. And thank you, Gary, and colleagues for the opportunity.
Great, thank you for that, Tim. So now our resident in global health diplomacy and AI, here for this hour and a half. Brian Wong, he's a digital consultant. He's going to give us a bit of takeaway messages that he's been taking note of. Please go ahead.
Great, thanks, Gary, and thanks again to all our panelists for such an engaging discussion on global health diplomacy and AI. I think we've all learned a lot, and you've given us a lot of food for thought to take home. I appreciate I'm standing between you and coffee, so I'll try and keep this brief, but some quick reflections from me and things that stood out, and I'll break it down into 5 Ds. We love our mnemonics, right? So the first is on digital and data. So how do we ensure equitable access to AI technologies and data and robust governance? We heard that global health gains really hinge on how we govern digital technologies, and that AI can really transform health systems for the better if we ensure equitable access to digital transformations and robust governance. Tim reminded us about kind of efficiency gains and how WHO is eyeing, member states are eyeing kind of AI for research, analytics, and administrative tasks, but are kind of cautious about letting AI draft global resolutions. So AI might do the heavy lifting of summarizing reams of policy documents, but it's not going to be brewing the coffee at 3 a.m. when negotiators are in that room trying to reach consensus. So the second D is on diplomacy. So Anders kind of reminded us about this kind of how old art is meeting new tech, right? So diplomacy is an ancient art, yet AI is new, and both need skillful blending. The next gen of health diplomats may employ or rely on AI for intelligence, but still need to charm humans into agreement. And we heard about the planetary health angles from Jamila and Ricardo as well, about how global AI governance can't just be about health policy. It needs to consider planetary well-being and the climate footprint. And AI can help unify quite fragmented negotiations across multiple international agreements, but it's not going to replace those kind of important face-to-face humility and those negotiations. So AI might be able to craft the perfect sentence for a resolution, but it's not necessarily going to replicate the good old-fashioned charm of dinner diplomacy or tactical ego massaging, right? And thirdly, around disparities, Ricardo cautioned us about kind of the global south and digital divides. Whoever leads AI is going to lead in everything, right? So currently, leadership, as you said, is quite concentrated in very few countries, and that really risks like the widening of disparities in low and middle income countries. And we heard about Thailand's really interesting steps in how you've been applying AI to your public health roadmap and leveraging public-private partnerships to adapt AI to local contexts. The fourth D is on dilemmas and kind of how do we navigate ethical, trust, and environmental challenges of AI. So I think several speakers emphasize that really delicate trust building aspect. So while AI can really find patterns in kind of negotiating language or power landscapes, it can really also undermine trust if data privacy or biases are mishandled. And then again, the planetary concerns about how the carbon footprint of AI is no joke, and our fancy models really guzzle energy, water, and especially at scale. So AI might be able to help us cure diseases, but simultaneously we could be boiling the oceans if we're not careful. And finally, development. So how do we harness AI innovations to sustain health and societal gains? So I think speakers really challenged us to think beyond immediate solutions. We are cautioned that AI is a tool, it's not a silver bullet, and that policymakers, regulators, and legislators really need to develop sustainable policies to keep pace with disruptive technologies. And then finally, diplomacy as a bridge. So Anders was sharing his future of where AI might be assisting leaders in spotting windows of opportunity, and however the human capacity for empathy and strategic risk-taking really remains essential to advancing global health development. So let's use AI to read the political tea leaves, but we still need a human diplomat to pass around the teacups at the dinner table. So to bring it all together, one, AI is here to stay, but so are global health, global inequities and disparities if we don't act intentionally and with equity at the core. Two, diplomacy really needs to evolve, balancing the ethical, legal, and security dimensions of AI to foster trust. Thirdly, we've heard lessons about how local adaptation, capacity building, and public-private partnerships are key to implementing AI and digital health solutions. Planetary health demands that we address AI's environmental impact while leveraging its benefits to break silos and defragment. And finally, we need to be bold to bridge geopolitical divides and harness AI for transparent, efficient, and equitable health outcomes. So Khop Kun Ka, happy Chinese New Year, Xinyan Kuala for those celebrating, and I'll hand over to my colleague Sanjay, who's online, to discuss our next steps leading up to the World Health Summit regional meeting in April.
Okay, great.
Hello.
So, one last thing, Sanjay, if you're online, tell us about the World Health Summit regional meeting in Delhi in April and how some of what came out of here and summarized by Brian, you might pick it up at your summit in April. 2
Excellent.
minutes.
Yeah, sure.
So please don't hold us here.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic meeting. First of all, Happy New Year. Apologies, I couldn't travel because of my hectic schedule organizing World Health Summit regional meeting, which is scaling access to ensure health equity. And health diplomacy is a central topic in the World Health Summit regional meeting, which is from April 25th to 27th this year. So I welcome you to this regional summit in India, and there are several takeaways in terms of what Asia can offer to the world. Enhance global South-South cooperation, discuss several areas where we talk about health in all policies. I think the time has come where we talk about health in all diplomacy, and AI's intervention and how it will influence now and later. I think we need to be very strategic in terms of building collaborations. So the continuity of this particular session will be in India. I see some of my friends, well-wishers there. So excellent discussion. Thank you. Welcome to India in April. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So it's an evolving discussion. There'll be more on this and picked up by others as well. But again, I really thank you for all of our panelists today. Great discussion. Thank you for all coming here. Thank you for the hosts for organizing. And thank you those online. This is recorded and will be distributed. So those who want to come back to any of the parts, they can. Thank you. Enjoy your coffees and the rest of PMAC.